So today we're going to talk about the players that the Indiana Fever are going to protect in the expansion draft, and this is not a prediction. If the Indiana Fever don't do this, they are like, you fire the front office on the spot.
If the Indiana Fever wanted a clean result from the expansion draft, they got one. But if Fever fans wanted complete peace of mind, that did not happen. Because one of the team's most talked about role players is gone. And now a bigger question is hanging over this offseason. Are the new expansion teams actually building serious rosters, or are they just creating easy wins for the league's contenders? That is the conversation taking over WNBA circles right now. The Fever did avoid the nightmare scenario. They did not lose Caitlin Clark, they did not lose Kelsey Mitchell, they did not lose Aaliyah Boston, they did not lose Lexie Hull, and they did not lose Sophie Cunningham.
Now's the time for the Indiana Fever to do what I said earlier. Buckle down, bite down, get dirty, and find a way to keep all of those players together.
For Indiana, that matters more than anything. It means the core most fans care about is still intact. It means the front office still has a chance to keep this group together and build the kind of roster that can actually compete at the top of the league. But even with that good news, there is still one move that stings. Indiana lost Chloe Bibby. And for a lot of Fever fans, that one hurts more than people outside the fan base might understand. Bibby quickly became a fan favorite because she fit a very clear need. She could space the floor, she was willing to shoot, she looked like the kind of player who could thrive next to Caitlin Clark in a modern offense built on pace, movement, and perimeter gravity. Players like that are not easy to find, and when Fever fans saw Bibby's shooting profile and her confidence, many immediately started thinking the same thing. That is the type of player Indiana needs to keep. Now she is headed for Portland, and the reaction from fans has been emotional for a reason. This is not just about losing a bench piece. This is about losing a player who looked like she could fit the long-term direction of the team. At the same time, the Fever clearly made a calculated decision. Around the league, there has been speculation that Bibby's health played a role. There were questions during the season. She seemed available, then unavailable. There were moments where it felt like she could return, and then she never fully got back into the rotation. If Indiana had concerns about her long-term medical outlook, especially involving her knees, then this decision starts to make more business sense, even if fans do not like it. Expansion drafts force teams into uncomfortable choices. Sometimes a front office is not just choosing the better player, sometimes it is choosing the more reliable investment. That is where this story gets more interesting. Because while Fever fans are upset about losing Chloe Bibby, they're also looking at the bigger picture and realizing Indiana came out of this in a very strong position. The names that matter most are still on the board. Sophie Cunningham is still there, Lexie Hull is still there. The foundational stars are still there. And now this becomes a test of how serious Indiana really is. This is the moment for the Fever front office to show the league they are done thinking small. If you have Caitlin Clark, you do not waste time. If you have Aaliyah Boston, you do not hesitate. If you believe this team can be a contender, then the mission now is simple. Keep the right players, add more shooting, add more toughness, add more two-way depth, and make sure the roster around your stars actually makes basketball sense. Because the expansion draft also exposed something else. The new teams do not look intimidating, not even close. And that has led to a much broader debate across the WNBA. Was the league truly ready to add more teams right now? On paper, expansion sounds like growth. More cities, more fans, more opportunities, more visibility. That's the positive side of the story, and the league wants to push that message. But roster construction is where the reality starts to hit. If expansion teams are entering the league with weak talent pools, limited star power, and shallow rotations, then what exactly are we looking at in year one? Competitive basketball or scheduled losses? That is why so many people are calling these new teams easy wins. Take a look at the names being discussed around Toronto and Portland. There are some useful players. There are veterans who can help. There are specialists who can fill roles. But when you compare these rosters to established playoff teams, the gap is obvious. This is not about disrespect. This is about level. Expansion rosters are supposed to be thinner than championship rosters, but the concern here is that the difference looks extreme. One of the biggest names attached to these discussions is Marina Mabrey. She gives a roster some edge, some scoring ability, and some personality. But if Marina Mabrey is one of the headline names on your new expansion team, that tells you a lot about the talent level. She is a recognizable player, yes, but she is not the kind of centerpiece that changes the balance of power in the league by herself. Then you start looking at the rest of the projected groups, and the concerns only grow. There are useful guards, there are serviceable wings, there are players with upside, but there is not enough top-end impact for people to take these teams seriously right away. That is why Fever fans are looking at this and thinking something very simple. These are games Indiana should win. And if that sounds harsh, it's because expectations for Indiana are changing fast. This is no longer a rebuilding team that just wants to be respectable. This is a franchise with the biggest young star in the sport, a former #1 pick in Aaliyah Boston, a major spotlight, and enormous pressure to capitalize. So when fans see expansion teams entering the league with fragile-looking rosters, they're not reacting with fear, they're reacting with opportunity. For Indiana, the path is right there. Keep the core together, bring back the right role players, use free agency intelligently, and attack the season like a team that expects to win, not just compete. That is why Sophie Cunningham's name matters so much in this conversation. Many fans thought there was a real chance one of the expansion teams would take her. She brings toughness, she brings attitude, she brings spacing, she brings edge, and in today's WNBA, those players have real value. The fact that Indiana still has Sophie gives this offseason another layer of urgency. If she is still on the roster, the Fever need to do everything they can to make that count. You do not survive an expansion draft with key pieces intact just to lose momentum later because you failed to plan. The same goes for Lexie Hull. Her situation matters too. She has become an important connective player for Indiana, and fans want clarity. Who is staying? Who is part of the long-term structure? Who fits best around Caitlin Clark? Those are the questions that define whether this franchise is serious. And make no mistake, this is now about fit as much as talent. The Fever cannot afford to build randomly. The Clark effect is too big for that. Her game demands spacing, fast decision-making, shooting discipline, and teammates who understand movement. If Indiana is smart, every move from this point forward will be filtered through one simple question. Does this player make life easier for Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston? That is why Bibby's exit feels bigger than just a transaction. She represented a profile that made sense. Shoot-first confidence, floor spacing, offensive utility. Losing that profile means the Fever have to replace it somewhere else. And that brings us back to the front office. The expansion draft did not break Indiana. In many ways, it helped clarify the stakes. They escaped major damage, but escaping damage is not the same as building a winner. That part comes next. The league calendar is moving quickly. Free agency is approaching. Qualifying offers will be part of the process. Negotiations will intensify, and this is where front offices separate themselves. The good ones use moments like this to create leverage and direction. The bad ones get comfortable because they avoided disaster. Indiana cannot afford comfort. The opportunity in front of them is too important. They have market relevance, they have national attention, they have one of the biggest young stars in basketball, and now have a roster situation that remains workable after expansion. So what should the Fever do next? First, keep the essential group together. That has to be the priority. If your best players and most functional role players fit your stars, you pay attention to that. Second, add more perimeter shooting. Not average shooting, reliable shooting. Third, add defense and toughness on the wing. Fourth, continue building a roster that can survive playoff basketball, not just regular season highlights. That is where some teams get lost. They build for attention, they build for social media clips, but the teams that win build for playoff possessions. Indiana has to decide what kind of organization it wants to be. And if you look around the league, the top franchises already understand this. The best teams are not just talented, they are structurally sound. They have balance, they have role definition, they know what identity they are trying to impose. Indiana now has no excuse not to think the same way. As for the expansion teams, they will have time to grow. No one is saying they're supposed to look like title contenders overnight, but the concern is valid. If expansion too fast without enough top-level talent to support that growth, the product can suffer. Fans notice weak rosters, players notice weak rosters, opponents definitely notice weak rosters. And if these teams become easy targets in the standings, the league will have to answer difficult questions about readiness and competitive integrity. That is the uncomfortable part of the story, but it's real. Expansion is exciting, expansion is important, but expansion also has to make basketball sense. Right now, many fans don't think these new teams are close to that standard. For the Fever, though, this is not the time to complain. It is the time to capitalize. They survived the expansion draft with their most important pieces intact. They only lost one fan-favorite role player, and now they have a clear path to improving the roster without starting over. That's a good position to be in. But the reaction over Chloe Bibby also shows something else. Indiana fans are paying attention now at a much deeper level. They're not just watching stars, they're watching roster fit. They're watching front office decisions. They're evaluating who belongs next to Caitlin Clark and who does not. That is what happens when expectations rise. Every move gets bigger. Every decision gets louder. Every loss of a useful piece feels personal. And this is only the beginning of the offseason. The expansion draft may be over, but the real work starts now. Indiana still has to prove it can think like a contender. It still has to prove it can protect the right pieces. And it still